or more above. And if you click the chat, you should be able to. Thanks, everyone. Amazing. I'll just wait a couple more minutes to make sure that we have everyone in.
I haven't got a clue. Oh.
You're still looking for the chat?
Yeah.
So along the top of your screen, have you got a button that says more with 3 dots along the top?
No.
Or you might have a little
three dots, but show chat bubbles is.
Yeah, you might be able to see that if you click that might help. See where you get to. If not, you can always just drop us an email afterwards. It's just good to see where everyone's from. How are we doing? Someone that can see the lobby? Is everyone admitted? Sorry, it's blank on my screen.
You can see that.
Yeah.
Send an email.
I'm just going to. How do I mute all?
If you go in the people one, I think you get a mute all on there. Katie, can you see it?
I've done it for you, Katie.
I think you may have muted her too, Sabrina.
I'm back. Okay, so hi everyone. If you've just joined us, please try and locate the chat button and just let us know which club or team you're representing. But welcome to our pre-season webinar for the 23-24 season. It's great to have you with us this evening. My name's Katie Oldreeve and I'm part of the competitions team at the RFU. With me this evening, I've got a few colleagues. I'll just introduce some of them. So we've got Simon Cruz and Sabrina McGill from the competitions team. We've got Mark Saltmarsh, who is our National Player Pipeline Manager. And we're also very lucky to have Simon Roberts with us from the University of Bath, who's going to talk to us a little bit about injury surveillance and the projects he's doing and how your team can get involved this season. So first off, I just need to make you aware that we're recording the session this evening for anybody that can't join us, and we'll plan to share that over the next few days. As I said, it would be great to see which clubs you're from, so please enter that into the chat for us. Simon, can you just click onto the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is our agenda for this evening. So this is actually the 3rd season now that we've run this pre-season webinar, and it's run as a follow-up to the PDF pre-season briefing that you should have received in August and that you've hopefully received, but we'll drop a copy of that into the chat as well in case anyone hasn't. So we've got a pretty packed agenda for tonight, so I won't spend too much more time talking. But tonight we're going to run through, so we've got Women's Injury Surveillance Project, some key regulations and changes. We're going to talk a bit about 17-year-olds playing adult rugby, some electronic match cards, and we've got an update for you on our brand new Women's Competitions Advisory Group. And we'll finish tonight with some questions and an open forum. If you've got questions as we go along, please do drop them into the chat and we'll do our best to answer them either as we go along if it's appropriate or at the end in the forum. So do we have Simon Roberts on the call? Simon, if you're here,
yes,
are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, fab. I think we've made you a presenter, so you should be able to click the share button and show your slides.
Yeah, I saw the little notes, so I'll give that a go, yeah.
Fab, thank you.
Hi there, Katie, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're good to go.
Oh, good, thanks. I froze at one point when you were introducing that, so I really hope my internet is okay. But if that's okay, yeah, I'll start off if that's all right, Katie. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Simon. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, thanks everyone. Thanks for Katie to having me on this call. It's really nice to speak to lots of people. My name's Simon Roberts and I run community injury surveillance programs. I'm based at the University of Bath, mainly the community ones I work with, but also university. And I do some stuff with the schools as well, but primarily it's the community project. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that today. It's going to be fairly brief, but I'm always contactable afterwards if anyone wants to chat. And I should just start by saying I'm sure there's people on the call who've contributed to this project. So it's just a massive thanks to me if you've contributed in the past or have registered to do so this season. We're extremely grateful for everyone participating. And if you haven't heard of the project, then yeah, hopefully you'll learn a little bit now. So yes, so almost like I just said there, we were managed at the University of Bath, just a brief introduction. And the project allows us to monitor injuries across the community game in England. Before we started in 2009-10, that was for the men. We didn't know anything about community injuries, and a lot of people took that sort of risk out of that elite.
Oh, have we lost Simon from the call?
I think he's just frozen for a second.
Okay.
Hopefully he will come back to us soon.
I wonder if you might need to rejoin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you did freeze for a little bit there, Simon.
Yeah.
There you go. You're back.
I'm sorry about that. Could someone just...
Looks like he's frozen again there.
Okay. Simon, I wonder if he can hear us. Just wondering if he has another method of joining, if he can join on his phone and we can share. Yeah, good idea, Claire. You could stop. Is he still on the call? Sorry, I can't see the people list. Hi, Simon.
Yeah.
Do you want to try turning your video off and see if that helps?
Fortunately, I think he's frozen again. I think we had him back briefly and then he's frozen again.
Should we move on to onto our regulations update and then see if we can get
Simon on the more stable
Simon
connection.
back? Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you okay.
Right, I'll just bring up
the coming off. Yeah, can you go back to showing the screens? Simon, if you can hear us, we will just switch to the key regulations and changes update, and we'll just see if we can come to you a bit later. See if we can get you a more stable connection. Okay, so key regulations and changes. So Sabrina, is this are these your slides?
These are my slides. Okay. So there haven't been as many changes as there were last season. Last season there was the merging of the women's and the men's regulations into Regulation 6. All playing regulations can be found in Regulation 6, with the registration regulations being found in Regulation 14. There is a note there that says that understanding the regulations that govern your league level will actually help improve your experience of playing the game. We highly recommend reading and understanding these regulations before you go ahead with playing your matches. It will help you really understand what's appropriate at what level, and how the game should be focused for your level as well. In National Challenge 2, the main change is that you're now playing to full World Rugby laws. So this is full 80 minutes of rugby, 40-minute halves. You can push more than 1.5 meters in the scrum, but you can apply the game on principles as long as both teams agree to that in advance. NC3 as well is game on principles apply, so you can play with reduced numbers, reduced timings, and you can bring in the information regarding the scrum as well. The championship playoff now is included in the regulations, so this includes the format of the playing structure and also how you are how you qualify for that championship playoff as well. And those are all the regulation changes so far. Points that we want you to really consider is that there are some changes which will actually result in sanctions. These can be fines, but also points deductions. So all teams need to familiarise themselves with the sanctions table to understand what the outcome would be if certain things were to happen during the season. Walkovers is the main one, where a points deduction will actually apply to the team giving the walkover, as well as the team receiving the walkover gaining the points. Rolling substitutions are now applicable to all fixtures. Player matching is only applicable to NC2 and below. And then postponed fixtures, if fixture doesn't go ahead, you have 7 days to rearrange that fixture, or the alternative is that the RFU will step in and pick the next available playing date for both teams. We've put some key dates in there as well. So the transfer deadline. So this is the date by which you must have transferred any outstanding players that you want to play for your team for the rest of the season. So that's the 16th of February. Please note that you must include the 7-day transfer notice, so work a week ahead of that. Fixture deadlines as well, so all of the fixtures for Championship 1 will be finished by the 7th of April, and then Championship 2 and below, all of your fixtures must be completed by the 5th of May.
Thanks, Sabrina.
No problem.
So we're on to 17-year-olds playing adult rugby. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Good, great. Evening, everyone. Thanks very much for, well, brilliant turnout, over 100 people. That's good for one of our webinars. So well done, everyone who organised it, and well done, everyone, for attending. What we wanted to do is just give you a bit of an update around 17-year-olds playing adult rugby, and a number of you will be familiar with this and with playing out of age grade in the age grade game as well as playing adult rugby, but some won't. So we're going to sort of start with the basics a little bit and give you a bit of information around what happens in terms of playing out of age grade. We'll talk specifically then around what the process is and how the system works, and then a little bit of the things to consider from an adult and age grade playing perspective. And I guess the first thing that's worth reiterating, and I see some very familiar names on this, and you'll have heard me say this many times, that whenever we talk about what can be done to play out of age grade, we always start with the fundamentals, which is the default is for young people to play in their age grade. That is absolutely what the game is designed on. The progressions are designed on a combination of their age, their maturity, and the building blocks that they play at each age, right from under 7 right through to under 18, are built with that in mind. So the default and the priority is always to try and help young people to play within their age group that they're playing in. And actually, changing that and skipping some of those components that take them from age 7 to 18 is a risk to their safe participation in the sport, which is why we say the default, as far as possible, is to play in their age group. And of course, that's not only about what happens on the pitch, it's about what happens off the pitch as well. The peer group that they spend all their time with at school or college or wherever it might be is that age group. It's their friendship group. It's the group that they are going through their education and academic challenges and opportunities with. It's the group that is maturing at the same rate as well. very much. So all these things, the life changes, everything they're going through is mostly involved in their age group. And of course, the people that support them, their parents or teachers or coaches or whoever it might be, are most connected with each other as well. So it's a really big decision to play a young person out of their age group, and we just want to reiterate that at the outset. But the regulations do recognise that there are cases where that is a good thing for the young person to do. All those other benefits can be overridden if there's a real benefit for them to play outside their age group and outside that sort of default. But as I say, it is a big difference, and you know, really should be treated as such a decision to make that. And what Regulation 15 does, moving on to the second point, and specifically around young people of 17-year-olds being able to play adult rugby, there are two parts to the process. Part one is the opportunity to be able, as a club, to apply for approval to play 17-year-olds in adult rugby. And what you do as a club is make that application to your CB, and I'll talk about the process for that and show you some of those things in a second. And that once that approval is in place, then individual players can then be applied for and approved as well. So basically what we're looking at is a robust system that enables an assessment of the individual, but also an assessment of the club before that takes place as well. And it does provide the ability for a 17-year-old to be able to play contact rugby with adults, both in training and playing matches as well. So the regulation itself is Regulation 15.6, and then 15.7. See the note there on Centre of Excellence players, is if players are in the Centre of Excellence or in the England programme, girls playing in there, then that actually is a different approval. That needs to go to Don Barrell, who is the head of performance and pathways and programmes at the RFU, and those players have a different approval. We've had instances this season just gone, and actually in the run up to the current season, of that going to CBs when it should go to the performance team at Twickenham, and they can obviously give you that information, and we'll provide in a follow-up to this those links and email addresses that you can make those applications as well. So just to confirm, any player who's in the Centre of Excellence or above goes through that process rather than through the CB process. And really simply, if there's no approval in place, that player can't play. There must be an approval, obviously, because we're talking about safeguarding and welfare implications for that young person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share my screen and show you where you can find the information. Some of you will be familiar with this, but not everybody. So I am sincerely hoping this is going to work.
Sorry, Mark, we've got a question from Becky Williams.
Go on, Becky.
Becky's got a hand up.
Hi, Mark. With regards to the online approval process, I've actually already had a player through that is CFV that comes automatically to us as a CB. Can you clarify if there is any way on the online approval to reroute it to anyone else?
So what we would ask is that if a CB receives the application, then they reroute that. We can look at a way to do that, but then that would mean additional information would need to be filled in. And although we're trying to streamline the forms, etc., it does mean that would require additional information put in by a club volunteer, etc., which would be a repeat, Becky. So we need to have a think about that. But yes, possibly that could be done. As we are at the moment, we'd ask in those instances that the CB puts the club in touch with Don.
Okay, thanks.
Is that okay?
For that. Are you going to be putting out further comms to clubs? Because at present, I don't believe there's anything clear and concise within the regulations to let clubs know.
Yeah, so it is in 15.7, and actually in the community game update next week, we're going to do an update on playing out of age grade, which will include that as well.
And would it be possible to also get all the CFV centres to notify players so that they're aware of the process, just in case the club contact isn't aware?
Yeah,
just
so
that from every avenue.
Yeah, there's been contact with the Centres of Excellence last week, actually. Emily Mumford has been doing exactly what you've suggested.
Amazing, great minds. Thank you so much.
Okay, right, let me just, if I share my screen, so can you see that okay?
Yes, yeah, we've got you.
Great, thanks. So this is the RFU regulations screen. And if you go to regulation 15 down here, there we can see on the right hand side are the forms for playing out of age grade. And these two here is the club approval for playing adult rugby, and then the player approval form for playing adult rugby. And then these are the other ones for within age grade. There is also this club guide, which is really helpful in terms of providing support for both filling out the club form and the player approval form as well, and actually runs you through the types of information against the questions that are asked in those forms. And the club guide looks like that. So as I say, it provides information in there. You won't be able to read that, but it's a couple of pages of FAQ, and then talks about each part of the information that's asked for and what the information that you'd be putting in there is. So that's really helpful. And then the forms themselves look like this. So the first approval is the club to be approved, and you'll see here after the preamble it talks about things like what's your safeguarding setup in your club, because remember we're talking here about children. 17-year-olds are still children being in an adult environment playing adult rugby, so safeguarding is massively important. It then talks about who will be the key people who will support that young person or those young people who may be playing up, and ask the club to actually be really specific about those people to give their DBS numbers. And then some messaging around some of the practicality of young people playing rugby or training with adults as well. And then a declaration at the bottom. Okay, so that first of all will go off to the county, and as long as that's approved, then a club is able to apply for players to be approved individually, and there's an individual form for each player required. So it reminds here that the club must be approved first, and again after the preamble, the details of the player, what we're asking for them to do in terms of their current playing position, what will they do from an adult playing perspective, what's their experience of playing the game, so making the case for them being ready to play adult rugby. And then the assessment is not only about their ability to play the game, physicality, etc., but very importantly about their social and emotional development for their age as well, because clearly we've heard many times if they're big enough, they're old enough. We all know that isn't the case. There's many other things to consider around a young player's readiness to play in an adult environment, and then that requires an endorsement and a declaration as well. So deliberately, a really robust system and process is required to have players playing up into adult rugby. So Simon, do you want to just pop up the slide again? So just the links to that, I'll put the link in the chat when I'm finished. And the final thing, just to say, often what we've seen and this is the same in both the boys and girls game as well, men's and women's game, is that often clubs think about lack of numbers before they think about benefit to the child. This is all about the benefit to the child to play in an adult rugby environment before it's about anything else. As I said earlier, they legally still are a child, so it's a big decision for them to be playing adult rugby. And that's the sort of parting message that we're really keen to give. Often we have players who play up into adult rugby who aren't ready. We need to make sure they are ready. And also, of course, it's really important to think about the implications on that under 18 group, because the players we're talking about here probably are the nucleus of that group. They're the leaders, the Pied Pipers for those other under 18s and under 17s in the dual age band. Take them out, and that provides some really difficult challenges around maintaining the group. And what we would advise clubs to do is to be patient and bring the whole group up together rather than cherry picking from that group, because you'll get far more players will will make that difficult transition into adult rugby if you think about bringing them up as a whole group rather than fragmenting them. And that's why it's an exception in regulation rather than something that we would do as a matter of course. So hopefully that's give you a bit of information about the process, where things are. Put the link in the chat as well. I think, oh, we've got Becky, is that another hand up or is that?
Yeah,
Go for
got
it.
one more question. With regards to club approval, one of the challenges we're seeing is that a club will fill it in and put their key contacts down for their male team and automatically presume that that covers the female team. Is it possible to look in the future to amend and say this is both covering your male and female? And if it is, then you need to put the right contacts down for both teams. We've had a bit of confusion from a couple of clubs this season. They actually completed it with all the female contacts and presumed it covered them for the males, which of course it didn't. So we've asked them to do 2 different submissions.
Yeah, the form's been updated, Becky, with exactly that. So you can now say whether you're applying for male rugby, female rugby, or both. And what we're actually looking at is do we need to have separate forms, because the number of people, especially in a big club, the number of people involved in supporting those young people is bigger than the number that's on the form, and it means that there's a really serious look at it by the club, which, as we said, is massively important. So yeah, it's a point we're looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, we also have that challenge. We've got a few clubs that have got 4 teams, and in turn there's insufficient areas to put all of those key contacts. We just asked for a separate email with everyone on.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a second hand up, I think. Matthew, have you got a question for Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask with regards to training, if it's non-contact training, can the under-18s join in with handling drills and things like that?
Yeah, so hi Matthew. Yep, so under 15.6 in the same regulation is the regulation about people playing non-contact together. As long as it is non-contact and is risk assessed in terms of what might be some of the situations or risks that could happen, yes, absolutely. People of different ages can play non-contact rugby together, but we have to be sure that it remains non-contact. We've had some examples last season of, and this is with younger children actually, where coaches were supposedly playing non-contact against them. We had an incident of a child being injured by a coach diving for a try through players, and coaches just not being sensible enough about what they're doing. You'd also need your adult players to be really clear what is required. The term shoulder on happens a lot and people think that's non-contact. Shoulder on rugby is absolutely contact rugby and shouldn't be taking place. So yeah, within regulation, Matthew, yeah, absolutely fine, but it must genuinely be a non-contact touch session.
Great, thanks.
Okay, next one, professional 005. We'll just have these 2 with hands up now, and then I'm just conscious we'll move on to the next section because there'll be a big open forum at the end. But go for it. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sorry guys, I couldn't change my name. It's Matt Parcel. I'm from North Bristol.
Oh, hi Matt.
Club. Okay, you all right?
Hi Matt.
Just a quick one, Mark. So I know the COE asked the question about non-contact, and they were told it doesn't include it. They're not allowed to do non-contact. And I think then you've gone back to the COE and said that was incorrect, and they are allowed to do non-contact. Our girls at the moment have been told categorically not to train with the women, even non-contact, and that's what we really want them to do, because we want to improve their kind of handling and things like that. So we're not really looking for sign-off to play, but we would like them to do non-contact training. Can that message kind of get back out? Because at the moment they're just being told by the COE sort of don't, you're not to train with the women, and we're not going to go against the COE. Like, we've got a good relationship with them, but it feels like there's some mixed messages there, and I think it sounds like it was quite hard, category not to, and that hasn't come back through, I don't think.
Yeah, I know Emily and Don are looking at it, Matt, in terms of how we can have some much clearer, it goes back to Becky's question, some much clearer guidance about the parameters for that. I think what they've done at the moment is said, let's just hold where we are and then look at how we might be able to develop it going forwards. And I'm actually catching up with them this week, so we can have a look at some wording that can make that clear as well. But that was that briefing with the COEs last week with a view to moving it on as well.
Yeah, because our concern is that, so we've had 3 or 4 that have gone for trials with their Premiership club. But for the ones not in college, so if they're in college, fair enough, they're doing enough rugby. But for the ones not in college but at COE, they've got such a drop off in skill level. We just want to be able to offer them that extra kind of skill practice, I guess, to pick up. Yeah, so that's our point really. Yeah, cheers.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, one more from Kim. Do you want to come off mute to
Hi.
answer a question?
Hi. Hi. Thanks. Yeah, you
Hi,
answered
Kim.
one of them. Question was the shoulder on shoulder. There's a bit of a difference of opinion with our under 18s cohort. Could you answer this one? Can they be part of an uncontested line out? As in, are they able to participate in being lifted or lifting?
So a lift in the line out would constitute a contact. That's
Lovely.
a contact technique. So
Yeah.
the answer is no.
That's fine. Thank you. It's been a topic of conversation and I'm glad I've asked the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kim. And thanks, Mark. If that's
Thanks,
all
Katie.
the
Cheers.
questions, I think we've got Simon Roberts back with us. Simon Cruz, can you please put up the other presentation? Here we go. Right, Simon, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you want to go ahead? And if you just ask Simon Cruz when you want to move slides.
Thanks, Katie. Yes, I could hear everything before, and it was frustrating because no one could hear me. So, massive apologies. And I'm not sure where I broke off, so I'll kind of go from the start, but I'll make it fairly brief. But yeah, no, just a thanks to Katie for having me on the call and just talk about some of the injury surveillance work we do, and particularly in the women's game now, which is growing. Next slide, please. So just as a brief introduction, it's mainly the Community Rugby Injury Surveillance Project that I manage in particular. I run that from University of Bath, as we do our professional ones in both the men's and women's games and international ones. We cover the whole breadth, but obviously we're talking about the community one in particular here. And the reason we run the community projects is because before we did this, so the men started in 2009, the women more recently, 2021-22, which is why we really need to build this this sort of data, so we've got a better idea of what's going on. Without these community projects, people often take the elite level data as their injury risk in the sport, and of course we've shown that particularly in the men's, the risk is a lot lower than the professional game. So that's why it's so important that we're able to produce this objective data and just really inform players, coaches, anyone involved in the game of what the risk is. We're really proud that it's the biggest community injury surveillance project in the world. Like I said, once we build the women up, that'll be the largest as well. So that's really important. And of course, it does rely on the voluntary participation of community clubs. So it's just a pre-thanks from me, because I'm sure there's clubs on the call. I've already seen some affiliated clubs that have done the project in the past or registered this season. So it's a huge thanks from me. It may be your colleague at the club who's participating, because quite often it's the medical lead who reports the data, but I'm sure people are aware of what's going on. So yeah, just a thanks. Next slide. So just a really brief overview of some what we understand now about the women's data in the context of all the other competitions. So the slide I've got up here is from our 2021-22 data. We're still processing season 22-23, so that's not quite ready. So this is the latest data we have. And of course, like I said, it's the first season of women's data. So this slide is just one bar for all our different projects, and it's really nice to be able to put them onto one slide and show that difference across the leagues. These are for 8-day match play time loss injuries, and we can see the risk goes down as we go through the levels, and the women's projects there are embedded in. And we can see in the community game that pink bar, fourth from the right, against the other men's community teams is, it's about as high as the higher level of men's community rugby, but it's about the same as the average across all those three levels. In the men's game, I should reiterate, we're able to split it into levels 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7, 8, 9 to just dissect that really broad range of community rugby. In the women's so far, because it was only one season, levels, I think it's 2 to 5 here, but we include levels 2 to 6. They're just one group. So what we really want is more women's teams to be able to really pick out those differences across different playing levels as well when we're able to. Next slide, thank you. So just a little bit more information. Sorry, this is so small on my phone, I can't really see it that well. But in the tackle, I think it's knocking on 70% of injuries in the tackle. Already, that's the difference compared with the men's data. So this is why it's so important we're able to pick this apart a little bit. We know that the tackle is obviously one of the biggest risk areas in the sport, hence the reason for the lower tackle height this year. So picking out these differences between the men's and women's is important because it means we might have different ways of approaching injury prevention. Concussion is, oh, sorry, still on the previous one. Concussion is a little bit higher in the men's as well, and that's something that's been seen across other surveillance projects across the world. So that's a common finding that women's concussion incidence is slightly higher than men's. So that's another thing we really need to keep our eye out and investigate more mechanisms of injury, how they occur, and we use video analysis to look at multiple tackles to see, how injuries are occurring, and that informs how we intervene. And then the top type of sites, they're quite common across all injury, obviously being the contact sport. It's the ones that it's the knee, the ankle, the thigh, and the shoulder that really keep players out for the longest. The knee mainly because it's the most severe injury. Next slide. So sorry, just going back to the previous ones. You don't need to go back, so I'm into the last slide, but just to say that we do have more information there in our season reports on that. So, and they're all available on the Keep Your Boots On Rugby Safe website. They're all available there. So in terms of what we need clubs to do, this is the important bit, because I know clubs often come to us and say they're really interested, but obviously this is a voluntary project and there is a little bit of work to report the information, although sometimes it's the kind of data that clubs already keep. So what do clubs need? So levels 4 to 6, we just require information on match injuries. So we need someone at the club to compile the squad list, and that's just to create a list of players. That's the simple start. And then throughout the season, just some brief information about matches. So simply who the opponents were, the score, the conditions. We're interested in pitch surface as well. We do analyses on artificial and grass injuries. So that's very important. But the match information is very, very brief. And then we require some information on the injuries, and these are only in matches, and just the 8-day time loss injuries for these playing levels. That's basically an 8-day time loss is one that keeps the player out for obviously just over a week. The kind of information we have there is the playing position, when it occurred during the match, how it occurred, so it's a tackle, ruck, maul, scrum. How were they treated and who were they treated by, and then some brief information on the diagnosis. So simply a site and a general type of injury is fine for us, but a more specific diagnosis can be put down if that information is available as well. Next slide. For levels 2 and 3, so Women's Championship 1 and 2, obviously there's a smaller cohort of teams. We are working on a Tri-Nations project that includes England, Scotland, and Wales teams, and this is a World Rugby project. So we collect the information in pretty much the same way as our English community project, but we ask for a little bit more. The squad information is the same, the match information is the same, but we also collect some training injuries for this project, and that's basically in terms of the training, how many players were there, the duration of training. We need the match and the training information there because that gives us our exposure. So we can report injuries rates per those exposures. And then the injuries, same information as I described previously, but we also ask them for training and injuries of 1 day or longer. So this is a really important project. Like I said, it involves teams across different countries. It's a World Rugby project as well, and this will also incorporate some injury prevention exercises as the program delivers. And this is a 2-year project, so it's just over the next 2 seasons that teams are involved in this particular one. If you are a Championship 1 or 2 club and we'd obviously like you to take part in the Tri-Nations. If you were struggling to
commit the resources, the time to do that, you can still, as a Championship 1 or 2 club, just commit to the match information as I had on the previous slide. Just to say that our team at the University of Bath still coordinate. We're still the contact for this Tri-Nations project as well. Next slide. In terms of what we're able to give back at the end of the season, we provide some team feedback. So the infographic there posted is the one we produced there last season for teams, and it's basically a very short summary of your team's injuries compared with the average of other teams across your playing levels. We produce this as standard, but if teams are really interested in any of the breakdown of their data or interested in anything else, when we're happy to try and work with them on that to provide a bit more detail, a bit more information. The reason we provide this sort of infographic information is because the players can see it readily. It can be displayed to the club. Other club members who might not be as familiar with the injury surveillance process can just see a brief summary as well. So the teams that have had it before, I think it works for them. But like I said, we're open to listening to clubs if they like it presented any other way. And then of course, everyone's data gets pooled into our season report, which is obviously an average across all the different playing levels. And that is made publicly available soon after. I should say your data in the season report is completely anonymous. We only mention your club just in the acknowledgement section to say which clubs have taken part. No other individual player data or club data is identifiable within the report. Next slide, please. So we do have more detailed information on the project. Hopefully people are aware of the Rugby Safe web pages where there's various toolkits that Rachel Fall-Brown and Chrissy have put together. They do a great job on the player welfare sections. The link there is a hyperlink, but like I said, I hope people can find the Rugby Safe player welfare pages. And within that, we do have, if you look at the adult CRISP, with various sections with season reports, but also links to really much more detailed information about what's involved in taking part in the project. So I would recommend, if people want more information, to direct there. It also has a page where you can register your club, which is on the next slide. It's got a small screenshot. So we have this. This information is better on the Rugby Safe web page as well. That's our flyer that people may have seen before, trying to get teams involved, and the QR code there will take you straight to the registration page. The registration page, you're able to register other teams. So the men's teams can be registered, age grade club teams. There's schools as well if anyone happens to be involved in school teams as well. So we're trying to cover off various playing levels on there as well. So yeah, and if you register your interest on that, we'll get back to you with more detailed information, and hopefully people will be able to get on board from that. I think that's my last slide. But I'm happy to take any questions now, and if there isn't time or people have any questions they think of later on, I'm always happy to be contacted. I think the email was on those slides. I can put it in the chat actually if that's helpful. It's rfu-crisp@bath.ac.uk. You may have had any correspondence from an RFU-women email. It all comes to me, so it's fine. Either one is okay. I'll put that email in the chat, so there's a definite contact. But thank you for listening. It's been really nice to. I know there's a lot of people on the call, so it's really nice to be able to speak to a breadth of people involved in the clubs.
Thank you, Simon. Just quickly, do we have your permission to share your presentation at the end of the webinar, just so that people can follow up with some of that?
Yeah, definitely. And if hopefully they'll be able to access hyperlink in there as well then. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, fab. That's what I was thinking. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I think there was one from Kirsten while Simon was talking, which was, when will the full report of the season be available, which you kind of touched on a little bit there, and the same with the RISP, for using acronyms, from 21-22 as well.
Those to be imminent. So there is a delay. It seems like a while now since that one was developed, but the data processing takes a while, and then the writing the report, and then obviously it has to go through various structures and committees. So they are imminent. After this, I will send a reminder and just check where they are, because they will be posted as you might have been on the Rugby Safe web pages. The previous ones are there, so we are hoping to get those ones on there soon. The risk one as well.
Thank you. And we've got a hand up from GRFU.
Hi, just wondering, one of my roles is I'm the team manager for the county women's team, and we're in for tier 1. One issue we had with the season just gone was how close the championship final was to the actual county championship, and we'd lost quite a few players either through injury or just exhaustion due to that basically is effectively clashing. Just wondering, it looks, from what I can see, it looks very similar again this coming season. Is there any possibility, as we've got still time between now and when the county championship begins, for there to be a little bit more of a gap, please?
I'm not able to create that gap, I'm afraid, because I'm not involved in the scheduling. But you've actually hit in terms of how we look at the data. You've hit on a really good point in terms of looking at congestion of matches and how close they are to each other. So if our data set is large enough, we can start looking at if there is a concentration of games, if that does create an injury risk. We need quite a lot of data to be able to do that. So sorry, I'm skirting around a little bit your question about the congestion in the calendar, but I am not able to alter that. But if we have data that shows, that certain players are playing a lot in a short space of time, then it's valuable. Then that can be something that goes back.
Thank you.
I'll answer that one because that's more my realm. Yeah, so the structured season for this season has been signed off. So obviously you've all been sent the structured season for this year. So at the minute that's staying as it is. It's more just a case of trying to balance to make sure we can get everything fitted in, also to kind of make sure, particularly with the finals, that we can get them at Twickenham and things like that as well. So there is quite a lot of different aspects of it that come around to it, which do kind of unfortunately have a knock-on effect. But for this season, as it stands, the structured season will be as it is.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Anyone else? I think I can't see any more hands up. Was that a quick one? No. Is that you again, Matt?
Yeah, it was me. Sorry, I was trying to press it and it kept clicking.
No worries.
Sorry, guys, a bit of a page day. I had a question around sort of travel funding for the women.
Sorry, Mark, can we move this one because these are now separate questions? Can we move these ones onto the end?
Oh, sorry, mate. So I thought
no, that's fine.
Sorry.
It will be a valid question, I'm sure of that. But we'll just get through
then
the other bits and then we'll come up through
Cheers,
that bit.
Guys.
Perfect. Has anybody got anything pertinent to Simon's work, as in not me? Okay, no, I think that's all good. Thanks very much for your time there, Simon. Katie, was there anything else you wanted to add on that? Or
no, just to say thank you for joining us, and we'll share your presentation afterwards and hopefully get you some more teams for your studies.
No, thank you, and thanks for having me on. You have to leave the call now, but like I said, we're always open to having inquiries. If anyone's got any questions later on that come up, we'll happily speak to people.
No worries. Thank you, Simon. Okay, thanks everyone for sticking with us so far. Should we put the original presentation back up? And I think our next topic is electronic match card.
Yeah, so it is back to me. Okay. Yeah, first things first. My room is not as dark as it appears on the screen. I'm not in complete darkness, although it is steadily getting darker here. But yeah, electronic match card. So obviously, people who've been involved with the game for a few years now should be pretty au fait with this. But I'm just going to kind of give a general overview of it. So when it wants to work. There we go. Yeah, so electronic match card, for those who don't know, is a method of lineup input and score collection. It gives clubs the abilities to kind of track point scorers, try scorers, cards, and then their player minutes, which are obviously helpful from a coaching perspective. Every player has an individual player profile that's on the website, so you can track that basically going back for every fixture that they've ever played where they've been put on a lineup in electronic match card. There is the ability, if people wish, that their name can be withheld from that information, so it doesn't actually show up on the front end of the website. You just need to contact us in relation to that. But otherwise, yeah, the individual player profiles are a really good opportunity for someone to kind of look back over various seasons and see how long they've played, how many tries they've scored, if match events are filled in, and I'll get to that in a minute. Lineups and scores are mandatory for all of the RFU leagues, so that's levels 2 to 6, that's Championship 1 down to National Challenge 3. For Inner Warrior Series, it will depend depending on each of your bits. Kate, were you going to interject there? Because I know you got some info on that earlier today.
Yeah, I actually don't think any of the Alliance Inner Warrior Series are using electronic match card this season, but worth checking in with your organizer.
Yeah. Again, that's not to say that you can't do it, and if you want to track it yourselves, that's up to you, but it won't be mandatory in the same way. Which is what I should have just went on with with that as my next point. So yeah, just check in with your competition organizer, which more often than not will be your competition activator for your region. So there are some guides available on the Community Rugby Help section. That's previously been the help portal. Previously been named a couple of things, but at the minute it's known as the Community Rugby Help. So the guides are all on there, should all be nice and up to date. There is also, rather than me kind of running through an electronic match card, what I've done in this presentation, which we will send out, there is a webinar which has a video guide to how to fill in both a desktop and a mobile version. Alternatively, if you just search in YouTube for RFU electronic match card, it'll come up with the one from this year that I did. It will come up from the one with last year that I did, or if you're sick of my voice, there's somebody else did one last year as well. That's not me. But that'll kind of go through a step-by-step process in terms of how to do it on both the desktop and the mobile version. Just to kind of now give you like a kind of tick list of things to think about and make sure you've got done. So pre-match, all your players have to be effectively registered. So we're moving away from affiliation, but this doesn't mean affiliated to your club. It doesn't mean registered as a member to your club. It means effectively registered through the player registration module on GMS. To get onto that module,
Has Simon paused? Or...
Is that just so? Are you back with us, Simon?
yeah, as far as I'm aware, you tell me.
I can hear you again. Yeah, you just
Right,
froze
okay,
for about
fine.
5
Sorry,
seconds.
it's my usual internet connection problems. Sorry, I'll just start this bit again because I don't know what point I kind of cut out. So pretty much, yeah, everyone has to be effectively registered, which means registered on the player management module, player registration module on GMS, which can only be done by the women's registrar, who has to have a level 3 permission level. If you're looking to put a player on a specific team's electronic match cards by usually the first team in the women's game, they have to be assigned to that team. If they're effectively registered and not assigned, you won't be able to put them into the match card lineup, so that has to be done as well. Again, there's links to both of those there as well. Your lineup must be completed, so that can be done on a separate module within GMS, but that just requires a level 1 permission level and a match card administrator role. In terms of women's registrar, there will only be one of those within the club, whereas match card administrator, you can have as many of them as you need. So that's fine. During the match, so this bit is optional, and this is the match events bit, which you can also do post-match and post once the card's been submitted and confirmed. This is where you get all the information around like try scorers, if there's been any yellow or red cards, if you want to track the substitutions, so then you can track the number of minutes players are playing. Again, your match card administrator can do that, but we think that's a really useful tool and a really fun tool that can be really helpful in terms of marketing and things like that. But as I said, the match event side of things is optional. Post-match, you have to submit the score and confirm the electronic match card, which are 2 separate processes. The deadline for those can be found in Regulation 6. And again, that is all done in the same place for the match card administrator with their level 1 permission level. And I think that's the last bit from my bit. Yeah. Has anybody got any questions with regard to that? Katie, you're going to have to. I can't see any hands or anything. At least I lied. Becky.
Yeah, Becky.
Simon, just a quick question on what you've just said. You've just said that you can have multiple level 1 people for permission, but you've just said that you can only have 1 female women's registrar. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
So for the women's game, that means that we've only got 1 person, which is a single point of failure.
It's the same in the men's game.
Is that something that is going to be looked at as part of succession planning and having a backup plan for if someone's on holiday or whatnot?
So
Otherwise, we're encouraging people to share their passwords, which is, of course, what we don't want, especially when someone goes on holiday.
What we would be encouraging is that the data officer would reallocate the role in that scenario, not that people share their passwords, because that wouldn't be best practice.
And there's no option to have 2 people and have an assistant for those roles?
Not currently, no. It's obviously the other aspect of it is making sure that we're not giving out access to people's data, because the higher the permission levels, the more data people have access to. So it's balancing. But I understand your point, but that's to kind of balance that aspect of it.
We also have Molly's got their hand up.
Yep, go for it.
Do you want to unmute, Molly?
Yeah, oh sorry, it was a bit delayed.
No worries.
Just wanted to double check on the score and submitting the score and the EMC. What we saw last season was that it was all just being done on the electronic match card, and so if I wasn't the home team, it was a bit harder updating the electronic match card. Is it still the process that we can text the scores in and then within 24 hours of the game, the EMC needs to be submitted?
Yeah, I mean, all scores, that's a backup. That's very much a backup. All score submissions should be going through the electronic match card, and only the home team can do that. So that is always the home team's responsibility to submit the score and then confirm the match card.
Okay, thank you.
Was that everyone, Katie?
I think that's all the questions.
Okay, I think that's me. Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. No, Laura, did you want to ask one, or do you want to save it till the end?
No, hi, can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Obviously, the match card assumes that everyone plays 40-minute halves, which I know has changed this season, but for NT3, you are playing 35-minute halves, so your stats are all skewed because the GMS match card doesn't allow you to put how long your halves are. Is there any room for improving the match card? Because it's very...
There may be a way around that in the settings, but I would have to investigate that. Believe that with me.
It's all well and good having stats, but only if they're as good as the information we can input.
Yeah, no, understand that.
Geeky observation.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Thank you. Chloe, you've got your hand up as well.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I just want to ask a point because this probably sounds really stupid to everybody here. I'm very new to this and I've not done electronic match cards before. So when we're submitting one, you said about the lineup, do we also have to get the lineup of the opposite team if we're submitting it as the home team?
No, so basically the home team is responsible for their lineup, submitting the score and submitting the and then confirming the match card. The away team should put their lineup in. We do have it set up so that if need be, the home team can help and can put the away teams in. But the away team should be putting it in. The home team doing it for them is an absolute last resort.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Molly, is your hand still up from your previous question, or do you have another one you wanted to ask? Okay, cool.
No, sorry.
Right, I think no
Kieran's
problem
asked
at all.
a question in the
Ah,
Kieran's asked a question in the chat. He's asking if they can add player events if the home team has already submitted the card and he's the away team.
Yes. Yeah, you can. I like nice
Simple
simple
answer to that
questions.
one.
That's better. Cool. Are we happy to move on to the next bit for now?
Yeah, I think so. This is me, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yes.
Okay. So this is a bit of an update. So this season, we've introduced a women's competitions advisory group. So this is something that's been in the pipeline for some time now, and some of you may have seen earlier in the year there were some adverts came out for volunteers to apply to join. So first off, what's the purpose of the Women's Competitions Advisory Group? So it's really threefold. So firstly, to advise. So we wanted to make sure that we've got relevant volunteers, including some players from the women's game, advising the RFU competitions team. So just making sure that any development work that we do, any decisions that we make are really led by the game. Secondly, to have some vision. So we've obviously seen this continued growth in the women's game over the past few seasons, and we just want to make sure that we've got vision and that we're identifying really creative solutions to cope with any emerging issues that come from that growth. And then thirdly, preparation. So we know that we have a lot of volunteers from the adult men's game that are involved with the RFU, that sit on subcommittees and that kind of thing. What we really want is to develop the understanding of volunteers from the women's game as well, and give them opportunities to contribute to RFU subcommittees. So that's really the purpose. Simon, can you move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is kind of how did we get here? So we ran an open recruitment process from January 2023 with the aim of bringing in volunteers, players, people that coach, involved in the game, bringing them kind of into the fold. We had a really strong number of applications, and we also approached some candidates based on recommendations. Once group members had accepted their positions, we ran an induction online in May just to get everyone up to speed and on board with regulations and particularly changes for this season. And then the first meeting followed in June. So in terms of composition, we have one chair, Paula Bradbury, who I believe has joined us on the call tonight just to listen in. So Paula is also chair of Cheshire RFU. We've got 8 volunteer reps, so we've got at least one to represent each level from 2 to 6. Hi, Paula, thanks. And the Allianz Inner Warrior series. And we wanted to make sure that we had an even geographical spread to account for sort of differences across the country. So also remember, we've got our competitions operations manager, our results agent, Bob Morrison, who you've all likely contacted when you've used the new date form to request a change of fixture, and one competitions development officer. So that's the composition. Simon, can you move on to the last one, please? And then so we have a terms of reference. It's obviously a fair bit more detailed than this, but I've just simplified it for the purposes of sharing it on a slide. So what will the group be doing moving forward? So they'll be contributing to an annual review of the competition structure. So as you all probably know, every year in April when you enter, we effectively dismantle the pyramid and put it back together. So if we're looking at the structure or any development work there, there'll be opportunities. The group will essentially check and challenge development work that we do around competitions. They'll also have opportunities to consider the vision for future management and development of women's competitions. So obviously at the moment we've got this continued growth, and RFU women's competitions are at the moment run by a very small competitions team at the RFU. Whether it will need to be like that in the future, if we continue to see this rate of growth, we'll have to see, and that's another thing that we want them to consider. And also they'll be contributing to recommendations on one of our two RFU subcommittees. So obviously at the RFU, we have a very large and complicated governance structure. We have two main subcommittees that relate to competitions, so Adult Competitions Management Subcommittee and Competitions Development Subcommittee. And we will be having reps from the advisory group sitting on each of those. So reps that join, just finally, reps that join the committee, they're there to advise. So they're not necessarily there in the same way that council members are, that can be contacted with sort of issues that emerge in the game. However, we're aware that there might be things that you would like them to consider. So I've just included our women's competitions email address there. If there is anything that you would like the group to consider, and discuss any problems that you're foreseeing in the game, please reach out to us via the women's competitions at rfu.com inbox, and we will be able to set those up as some agenda items. So what I will probably do is just, Simon, do you want to move on to the next slide? So I think that's my final one. I'll just pause rather than take questions about the advisory group there. I'll just pause because we're into sort of the open forum questions section now. So thank you very much for listening. Does anyone want to, is there anything in the chat that we haven't addressed yet? Sabrina, are you looking at that? Does anyone want to put their hand up and ask any questions on the content that we've covered this evening?
We've got a question from Chloe. There's nothing in the chat though.
Thank you, Sabrina. Go on, Chloe, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi again.
Hi.
Something that my club wanted me to ask, and I don't think you've covered it, is rules around borrowing players from other clubs for fixtures. So obviously it's not obvious at all, but we're going into, for the first time, we're going into NC2. And there's clubs in the area with women's teams that are playing variety of different levels, and the fixtures don't always clash. So because we've got like some interrelationships with some of these other clubs, they wanted me to kind of put it forward to see what are the rules around that.
I'll field that one. So it is all in the regulations. There is a table that kind of addresses it. If you're going into NC2, and Sabrina, please correct me if I get this wrong. If you're going into NC2, you can borrow any player from NC3, and you can borrow other NC2 from other NC2 teams, but they cannot be from teams within your league.
Okay. Cool.
But I would double check the regulations because it is in there. It is in Regulation 6.
Yeah, there is actually an email going out tomorrow to all club contacts to let them know again about effective registration, borrowing and loaning.
Lovely, thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Chloe. Molly, I think you're next.
Thanks. I did send an email about this last week. I just wondered, unless I've missed it, I've seen emails saying that information was going to come out about travel funds, but I've not actually seen anything about how we can apply for it. Is that still to come, or have I completely missed it?
So there was a change in travel funding process this year. So obviously last year we asked teams to apply. This year, the way that was approved by our community game board was just based off basically the mathematics of it. So in terms for the onshore funding, and basically it was just enough cumulative mileage across the whole season. So teams that qualified will have been emailed, or should have been. If you haven't been, then there won't be travel funding for yourselves this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Katrina, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask and throw this back a little bit, because the pools have obviously been changed this year and we play in NC1. What do you think the impact will be about the travelling for games on a Sunday? For instance, we've got to go to Sudbury, which is 104 miles away, before you can turn up do your training before the game, play a game on a Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I just, I've obviously, you've mentioned today as well that any teams that are going to maybe, cancel or have a walkover, there's going to be point deductions as well. But, it's hard enough getting a team out as it is, but trying to get women to travel 104 miles to play a game at that level is really difficult. Do you think that's going to have an impact this season for lots of clubs?
So our aim and the reason why we kind of shift the leagues around each year is because we are trying to minimize travel on the whole. With the nature of that, some teams will, and what we're aiming for is more teams will obviously have a benefit to it. But unfortunately with that, because we are kind of shuffling the pieces around, there will be some teams that do have more travel in a season than they may have the season before. It might then flip back around the next season. It's just how the puzzle pieces fit together. This is obviously why we also, and you may well have done, but this is obviously why we also go out with the provisional leagues to give you guys the opportunity to feedback. And if we think there's a better way to do it, then we will have a look at it in that point. At NC1, like you're relatively high up, so that there's going to be there is going to be increased travel in general than there is than the other national challenge leagues. But yeah, it's just the nature of it where the puzzle pieces shift around a little bit each year, and unfortunately there will be some people who are worse off. But again, it's obviously we've got to look at it from the holistic point of view.
So do you think it's going to have an impact though on teams? I can see somebody else has just written there about how many games they've got over 100 miles, just one way. Do you think it's going to have an impact on the amount of people that are going to cancel because we can't fulfill a fixture?
It may well do, but it's the nature of the sport.
How is that going to help the women's game when you struggle to get a team and then you have that obstacle as well?
So as I was saying, the nature at the minute is that in certain areas we don't have the team density, particularly at certain levels, and until the game grows even continues to grow further, and we can kind of fill in some of those gaps at certain levels. This is going to be the scenario that we're in. We're a growing sport, specifically within the women's game. And as I said, until that density increases, there's only so much that can be done in that regard. Like, I appreciate that in an ideal world, everyone would play people who are on their doorstep who are of a similar level, but it's difficult to get that balance.
Yeah, I can just see other people obviously have the same views because it's all coming up. I just thought I'd ask the question because I don't think it's going to have a very positive impact on the game. And I think maybe smaller pools would be a solution rather than having 10 teams to a pool. And then you could have smaller sub pools and you wouldn't have to travel so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Katrina. I appreciate that. Eliza, you next. Or has Eliza put the question in the chat? Do you want to unmute yourself and ask yours? I've lost it now. I thought I just saw it pop up in the chat. Okay, let's go to the next person while I just figure out. Matthew.
Yeah, I think I'm probably just going around the same kind of issue around travel expenses again. When the travel expenses thing was sent out, one of our teams is in our Warrior League where we were told there's 6 teams really close by and we didn't really give it another thought. Since we've started trying to organise fixtures, 4 of those teams aren't doing contact rugby this year and they'll only be entering touch games, and 2 of them have said they're not getting a team out, so our nearest game is going to be 50-60 miles. Is there a way to kind of reapply for that, since the league that we're going into doesn't have the same layout as it did at the very start of the season?
Sorry, just confirming. So you're entering an Allianz and a Warrior Series league.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so as it's our kind of entry level playing opportunity, you will have the situation quite often where teams don't want to play 15 aside. So National Challenge 3 is the lowest level of the pyramid where you're sort of more guaranteed your 15 aside rugby. So I appreciate that can be challenging when you join the group. My best advice would be to reach out to your competition organizer. I'm not sure which area of the country your team's from, but if you reach out to them and explain the situation, they might be able to drop you into a different pool or at least put you in contact with a number of other teams that might be looking for a similar kind of format as you.
Yeah, so we've contacted teams in a different pool for fixtures, but like I'm saying, they're very far away. So then our travel obviously is dramatically increased from what we thought would be at the start of the season when we weren't allocated any funding because we had teams on our doorstep that we would be playing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. As Simon alluded to before, it's quite a tricky one where we don't have the density of women's teams in a certain area. Simon, I don't know if you were going to add something to that.
I was just going to say that unfortunately the
I'll ring tomorrow and ask them.
sorry, I just think something. That threw me off a little bit. Yeah, no. So unfortunately, the travel funding in terms of the budget that we've got has now all been allocated. So that there isn't any further funding available.
Right. Cheers.
Laura, I think you're next. Laura Phillips.
Hi. You said earlier about the people that have qualified for funding for travel have been notified. Out of interest, who would those emails have been sent to? Would it be the ladies' contact on GMS or would it have been the club contact?
I believe off the top of my head, it went to the honorary secretary and the treasurer.
Is there a way that, you know, not all clubs are very joined up? Could that information have come to the women's contacts so that we're aware? I mean, I've asked what the distances are to qualify for funding, and I appreciate that you said, you know, if you've got it, you've already been contacted. But is that information widely available so that people know, you know, what sort of distances they need to be travelling before they get assistance?
So in essence, a very simplified version of it is that unless you average 150-mile round trip for every fixture that you have, and that is like it's dependent on league sizes as well, that's the minimum threshold. So it was only teams that were traveling a cumulatively significant amount that would be getting any funding this season.
So that's changed quite a lot then, because it always used to be per game if you travelled over 150 miles.
Yeah, so there was a working group that looked at it, and that was the process that was agreed this season. And as I said, it was kind of approved through the subcommittees and through our community game board.
Thanks, Laura. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, I've got you next.
So mine was on the funding as well. We've got Jersey, so I'm assuming we've got travel funding, but I've asked my honorary secretary and treasurer and they don't have any emails.
They should have done. Yeah, so offshore is a slightly.
Any way to get it resent?
so the offshore is slightly separate. So yeah, if you're traveling offshore, as long as your club is not in has not breached payment of players within the entire club, that's not just necessarily the women's section, then if you're going offshore, so whether that's Isle of Man or Jersey or Guernsey, there will be let me rephrase that. If it's Isle of Man or Jersey, you will receive the travel funding. In terms of Guernsey, there is an agreement with Guernsey to help book the flights because they can get a better overall deal generally than what people can as singular clubs. But Isle of Man or Jersey, you will get £2,000 towards your trip.
Who do I need to contact to find out about that?
Sorry, what was it you're looking to find out?
if we've got it, because like I said, I've asked the honorary sec and the treasurer, and they haven't had. So who do I email to find out about that from the RFU?
It will be me. Which club are you from?
Sutton and Epsom.
Yeah, you should be getting it.
I'll email you later.
Yeah. No, I mean, realistically, it's going to be me you're emailing. So yeah, but I'm pretty certain that you've got it.
Thanks. We'll follow up with that one.
Perfect.
Alan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my question is in relation to under 18s players. This season, our under 18s team has sort of collapsed. And so the players that we have gone to another club under an arrangement we have with them. But a number of those players have said that then when they reach the age of 17, they want to be eligible to play for the Keswick team. And so my question is, if players are playing for under 18s teams, can they be dual registered to play adult rugby for a different team?
I'm happy to jump in there, Katie.
Thanks, Mark.
The simple answer is yes. So age grade registration, there aren't limitations on that. So you can register for as many different clubs as you want. Their adult playing would be separate, so they can come back and play at Keswick, Alan, but they would need to go through the process that we outlined earlier.
Yeah, I understand that. I just didn't know whether they could be dual registered.
Are you there, Alan?
Obviously, we'll put them through the process, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Jackie.
Hi. Mine's just going back to the electronic match card. Is there a deadline time when you submit it after a game has finished?
Yes, it's in the regulations.
Okay.
It's in regulation 6. So I'm not trying to be difficult. I just can't remember it exactly off the top of my head.
It just because last season, obviously, I always did it by 5 o'clock or something.
Yeah, it is around then. So yeah, it's at,
so it is, yeah, because we did have some teams who were doing it on a Monday after a Sunday game or a Tuesday.
So the score needs to be in the day of, and I think it's by 5 or 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's by 5:30. 5:30 for daytime or 10 p.m. if it's an evening match.
Perfect, right in the middle of what I was suggesting. So 5:30 for that. But the actual match card there, to confirm the match card, and this is what I was saying before, it's a separate process. The confirming of the match card can be done, I think it's 24 hours later, which is slightly tightened down from what it's been in previous seasons. But yeah, so that might be that they confirm the card later, but the score can be in. There's a little bit of a difference in terms of timing for that. But the score should be in day of.
But with
it's 48 hours after your match is completed, you've got to submit your match card.
But with regard to the lineup for the team, does that have to be in on the actual day?
The lineup.
Yeah.
The lineup should be in pre-match.
Pre-match. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Molly.
Thanks. So I just wanted to go back to the walkovers. So it wasn't last season, but the season before, the regs said that if teams were giving walkovers, they'd be automatically considered for relegation. And obviously we've seen in Champ 1, one of the teams now has already dropped out. So we're seeing, the credibility of the Champ and other levels really being challenged at the moment. So as much as there's the -1 point deduction for a team if they give a walkover, are the RFU going to be looking at wider sanctions being brought back? Because I don't see how leagues can justifiably go on if we keep having the level of walkovers that we do.
So, I mean, the DMP situation is a slightly separate one. In terms of the previous regulations, they were removed because they were seen to be too harsh by our legal and governance and the governance committee. in terms of it's more than the 1 point deduction. It will be a 5 point deduction at minimum. If you have a look in again in the regulations in the appendices, I think it's Appendix 3. There is the sanction table in that, which then explains what our potential sanctions are should it escalate.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And then I think Matt, you next?
Is it Molly next? I don't know.
Oh, sorry. No, I think no, Molly,
No,
you just
I'll go
asked your
for it.
question, didn't you? Yes, Matt, go for it.
To be fair, like a lot of it's been asked because and you're taking a bit of pasting on the travel funding, so I'll keep it quite short. Yeah, I was just surprised by ours. I think because we've travelled, I think it's 1,038 miles. I know other teams travel less than us and have got it, and I know you said cumulative miles, but I've just done the maths. And I don't know if ours was taken before you added Havant into the league, which is an extra 200-mile round trip. But yeah, I'd like to query ours if I can. If there's any way I could query it, I don't know. It feels like, yeah, 1,038 miles is a long way to go with about 6 or 7 grand's worth of coach trips.
I can double check it.
Yeah, if you can, Simon, that'd be great, mate. I've asked through my CB reps, I've asked through Nicola McComb, and I'm just like a little bit stuck with it. It's good with the Papa John's the way you did it, because it was quite clear. It's like very clear and precise. This is the amount of miles, this is how much money you'd get, I guess. But it all feels very quiet, and nobody's really sure if they're getting it or not. And I guess that's probably been reflected in a lot of people's comments. I guess it'd be a lot better if it was, I guess, clearer. Yeah.
Okay,
It sounds like
that
the
was it,
comms
mate.
could have gone out to better, to more contacts. Sounds like that would have been helpful. But yes, Matt, we can take that offline if you think that there's been a miscalculation there.
Yeah,
thank
good
you.
to know. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Okay, Laura Phillips.
Hi, sorry. Last year, in our league, we had so in the first weekend, 2 walkovers were given, and regardless of how competitive the league you are in, that's not why we're all playing rugby. We're not playing rugby just so we can tot up a table of walkovers. And I just wonder whether it's the understanding of the team admin, or whether the RFU could sort of step in a little bit. You know, if you're getting walkovers on the first weekend of the season, you've got at least a whole season full of weekends that you could reschedule. So I just feel it's really against the spirit of why we're playing that teams are just taking the walkovers to get the points rather than looking to be accommodating and rearrange. You know, life does get in the way of rugby games and the weekends that have been put in the calendar, but it should be up to all of the admins to try and work together to get people playing rugby rather than just collecting a bag full of walkovers. I don't know whether anyone else has had a similar situation.
So our preference is we always want games to be played. That is always our preference, and that is always what we will try and recommend first. But with the regulations as they are, all we can do is recommend it. Teams aren't obligated to rearrange, but our preference is basically what you said in that last line that you mentioned there, in terms of you wanted to we want teams to work together to get games played, particularly as you said when it's more towards the start of the season, when there should be there will be free weekends coming up. I appreciate people schedule things once the schedule is out, but ideally, obviously, as I said, the clubs would work together to find an appropriate date to rearrange if fixtures can't go ahead, particularly early in the season.
Is it something that the RFU monitor?
I mean, it all comes through us, yeah, and like we check the walkovers and see how they're doing, and then we reach out to if we see concerning aspects of it. But yeah, we are aware of every walkover that takes place.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Eliza, you're back. Do you want to try a meeting and ask your question?
It's actually Liz. It's
Elizabeth.
it's my grown-up Elizabeth name. So that's why I was confused.
I could only
no,
see the
that's
first
fine.
bit. Hi.
That's fine. I do have a question just regarding my understanding of the change in regulations. So our club, we have 3 dual reg players. And last season was if any of those players were put onto the match card for the Premiership club that they're dual reg to, they then weren't allowed to play a game. Say, for example, that was on the Saturday, and then we played on the Sunday. They weren't allowed to play because they'd been named on the match card, even in situations where they'd had 0 minutes. My understanding is this year, from the regulations that I've seen, if they've played 0 minutes on the Saturday, they can still now go onto the match card on the Sunday at their Champ 1 club. Is that correct?
Hi, Liz. That is correct. It was the same last season as well. So as long as they played 0 minutes on the Saturday, they could then be available to play on the Sunday. There's been no change there.
Okay, so that was my misunderstanding last year. To be fair, we played most of our games on the Saturday anyway, so where they were on match cards, we had clashes anyway. But that just helps because we have got some Sunday games this season. So yeah, thanks Sabrina. Cheers.
No worries.
Thanks, Liz. Joe Parker.
Hello. Oh, you can
Hi,
hear
Joe.
me. Sorry, it was
Yes.
still showing as muted. So then you got my my question is around borrowing players. We're an NC2 club, and I just kind of wanting to know if the reasoning behind not being able to borrow players from your own league. The reason I ask is we've for a couple of seasons now we've had teams in our own league that are quite close in proximity to us that have very often given walkovers because of lack of numbers, and we've had those players actually asking us, can we come and play? Well, they can't because they're in our league. So I'm just kind of, the question is, why can we not borrow from our own league if like sanctions were put in place, and the fact that you can't borrow a player if that player's team is playing, but that you could if their game had been cancelled or a walkover had been given?
So it's basically so you can't manipulate that teams within your league. Again, it's one of these regs that predates me, but it's probably because somebody did just that, or there was a concern around teams doing that at some point way in the past. But yeah, that's essentially why. It's because in theory you could lend, because again, obviously it's easier to lend to clubs closer to you, but teams might have an incentive to lend some of their best, and this is just an example or a hypothetical example, but teams could lend their best players to a team that they needed to beat like another title chasing team or another relegation battle team.
There was some understanding around the league that we're in. I mean, you know, not necessarily last season, but the season before, we definitely weren't sort of battling towards to winning the league.
Yeah, no, it's it with it. I understand what you're saying. It's just it's a very difficult to be like, ooh, if and like it's one of these regulations that kind of just, it's very difficult to, unless you do it the way it's written now, it's very difficult to then actually manage and monitor. So unfortunately, it kind of has to be as hardline as it is.
Okay.
Chloe, are you next?
Hello.
Hi, Chloe.
Hi. I just want to ask a question around if there's anything that would be available for player risk assessment. So the reason I'm asking this is because it's something that we're discussing in our club. I have a lady playing for me who is absolutely amazing. She's 71 years old. And she still wants to play full contact rugby, and she wants to play league rugby, and she's aware of kind of what she's going into. The president of the club is actually her son, and he's quite he's wanting to know if there's any kind of RFU guidance or anything in place so that the club can play her, as she's paid her membership and she trains and she does everything she needs to and deserves to play, same as everybody else, but also to keep her safe. I don't know if there's anything in place for that.
I believe Sabrina's just popped something on risk assessments into the chat. This might be one that's better to take offline if you want to drop an email to women's competitions, but we can certainly put you in contact perhaps with someone from player welfare or safeguarding to see how we can help there. But that's great news that you have a player that's 71 that wants to play. That sounds amazing.
She's amazing, and yes, as I say, she's royalty in the club because her son is the president and her 2 grandsons are the first team 9 and 10. So she's absolute royalty.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. Oh, mine have all got out of sync. I thought it was Sam next. Sam, yeah, Sam Cleaver.
There we go. Hiya. Yeah, just go back to the under 17s thing. So, or like the under 8, so like 17-year-olds playing training. So they can train non-contact without any permission. Is that correct?
Mark, are you still with us? Do you want to?
I am sorry. I was trying to come off.
Okay. Don't worry.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, because I've had to pretty much rebuild the women's team over the last year. Unfortunately, one of those that were having walkovers, and we had a similar issue where teams were not very forthcoming with trying to rearrange fixtures with us. So my kind of outlook and plan now is to try and use the girls in the next couple of years to try and filter in at least 2 or 3 into the women's setup. But unfortunately, there's about 2 or 3 coaches that run the girls team or teams. 1 or 2 of them are very forthcoming with trying to get the girls to come up. The other one is very much not against us, but is not very forthcoming with trying to do that. So we were trying to build that relationship as much as we can to do that. But he seems to be the main barrier at the moment, and the fact that now that there is no permission needed for non-contact training, I hope will make things a little bit easier. But my plan is never to throw them in the deep end anyway, but hopefully with them being a bit more with it not needing the permission for the non-contact stuff, I think hopefully that should be
Hang on, Mark,
all right.
Can I interject on that point and just seek some clarity? If they are children and training with an adult team, you still must ensure that your adult team staff and everyone is appropriately showing provision for a child being part of it. So we need to be really careful when we say that the under 18s can train with the adults with regards to what they're doing, who's managing them, and ensuring that everyone is appropriately DBS'd and the safeguarding still is in place. It isn't just a free-for-all for kids to come to adult training, even if it is just non-contact.
Yeah,
Okay.
Becky, that's absolutely the point. And actually in the regulation, if you have a quick look at regulation 15.6.2, it talks about having a risk assessment, that there shouldn't be people of different ages playing with each other unless there's been a full risk assessment, and that includes exactly what you're talking about, Becky, the right people being in the right places at the right time to support the group.
And as a CB, we do not support any underage players being at adult training within the season unless the club is signed off and we know that everything is appropriately in place, because it's those clubs that don't have anything in place that will see a young player, forget that they're there, progress onto contact, and then suddenly you end up getting yourself in the pickle. So make sure you get your club sign off done before you even contemplate having any age grade players near your adults.
Yeah, no, that would be the plan anyway. Is just that extra part then is making sure that they don't have to have that that's like the sign off thing, as if they're going to play for us. They're not going to play for us, they're just going to train and do the non-contact stuff. So like I said, make sure that the club is set, and then knowing that they can just come to us, they don't need all the extra paperwork doing unless they're going to come and play.
And my challenge is then, how are you going to manage and how are you going to identify that everyone is clear that no, they can't touch them? Because as soon as you do get someone silly, usually it used to be me at training, that drops a shoulder and goes, oh no, I can't do that, they're a child. You need to make sure that even in non-contact training, everyone is crystal clear these are kids.
Yeah, when I refer to non-contact training, it would be literal like basic skills. It would be handling drills, kicking drills, etc. I would try and avoid anyone going anywhere near them in terms of that context. It's more of the social side, so them getting used to being around the group. So when they do decide they want to come and play, they're already kind of integrated. They already know the players a little bit more. So hopefully then when they do come and play and they're 18, it's obviously not throw them in the deep end with contact straight away, but they are a little bit more knowing of the players around them, and vice versa with the women to the younger players.
Thanks. Right, I don't see any other questions in the any more hands up rather. Sabrina, is there anything in the chat that we haven't answered?
No, I think we've answered everything.
Fab, thank you so much. Okay, well, I'm conscious we're over time. It's been great to have so many of you on the call. So thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for your questions and your engagement. What we'll do is we'll follow up and send the recording out over the next few days. Simon, Sabrina, and possibly Mark as well, and I will just stick around for a few minutes in case anyone has any further questions. But thank you so much for joining, and we wish you all the best for the 23-24 season. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers all.
Thank you.
Simon, can I just confirm your email address, please?
Sorry, Jane, what was that? Which email address were you looking for?
The one that I can ask about the funding.
So it's the women's competitions at rfu.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
No worries.
Thank you. Is anyone that's still on? Do you have any other questions? Only a few of you left. Simon, it looks like you're sitting in pitch black.
It has now gotten to the point where it is that dark, yeah.